Good morning, this is Pastor Jeff. This is our daily lectionary readings for Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. We have our three readings. Once again, Psalm 119, 105 through 112 is going to be our psalm reading. 2 Kings chapter 23, verses 1 through 8, and 21 through 25 is going to be the Old Testament reading. And then 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 12 is going to be our New Testament reading. We are going to be reading it out of the Message this morning. So let us take a listen in. Psalm 119. By your words, I can see where I'm going. They throw a beam of light on my dark path. I've committed myself, and I'll never turn back from living by your righteous order. Everything's falling apart on me, God. Put me together again with your word. Adorn me with your finest sayings, God. Teach me your holy rules. My life is as close as my own hands, but I don't forget what you have revealed. The wicked do their best to throw me off track, but I don't swerve an inch from your course. I inherited your book on living. It's mine forever. What a gift. And now, happy it makes me. I concentrate on doing exactly what you say. I always have, and I always will. Our Old Testament reading today comes from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 23. We'll be starting in verses 1 through 9. The king acted immediately, assembling all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. Then the king proceeded to the temple of God, bringing everyone in his train, priests and prophets and people, ranging from the famous to the unknown. Then he read out publicly everything written in the book of the covenant that was found in the temple of God. The king stood by the pillar and before God solemnly committed them all to the covenant, to follow God believingly and obediently, to follow his instruction, heart and soul, and what to believe and do, to put into practice his entire covenant, all that was written in the book. The people stood in affirmation. Their commitment was unanimous. Then the king ordered Hilkiah to the high priest, his associate priest, and the temple sentries to clean house, to get rid of everything in the temple of God that had been made for worshiping Baal and Asherah and the cosmic powers. He had them burned outside of Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and then disposed of the ashes in Bethel. He fired the pagan priests whom the king of Judah had hired to supervise the local sects and religious shrines in the towns of Judah and the neighborhoods of Jerusalem. In a stroke, he swept the country clean of the polluting stench of the round-the-clock worship of Baal, sun and moon and stars, all the so-called cosmic powers. He took the obscene phallic Asherah pole from the temple of God to the valley of Kidron outside Jerusalem, burned it up, then ground up the ashes and scattered them in the cemetery. He tore off the rooms of the male sacred prostitutes that had been set up in the temple of God. Women also used these rooms for weaving for Asherah. He wept the outlying towns of Judah clean of priests and smashed the sects and religion shrines where they worked their trade from one end to the country to the other, all the way from Jeba to Beersheba. He smashed the sects and religion shrines that had been set up just to the left of the city gate for the private use of Joshua, the city mayor. Even though these sects and religion priests did not defile the altar and the temple itself, they were part of the general priestly corruption and had to go. The Old Testament reading continues then in verse 21. The king now commanded the people, celebrate the Passover to God, your God, exactly as directed in the book of the covenant. This commanded Passover had been celebrated since the days that the judges judged Israel. None of the kings of Israel and Judah had celebrated it, But in the 18th year of the rule of King Josiah, this very Passover was celebrated to God in Jerusalem. Josiah scrubbed the place clean and trashed spirit mediums, sorcerers, domestic gods, and carved figures, all the vast accumulation of foul and obscene relics and images on display everywhere you looked in Judah and Jerusalem. Josiah did this in obedience to the words of God. Revelation written in the book that Hikah the priest found in the temple of God. There was no king to compare with Josiah, neither before nor after, a king who turned in total and repentant obedience to God, heart and mind and strength, following the instruction revealed to and written by Moses. The world would never again see a king like Josiah. Our New Testament reading today comes from the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. Since God was so generously let us in on what he is doing, we're not about to throw up our hands and walk off the job just because we run into occasional hard times. We refuse to wear masks and play games. We don't maneuver and manipulate behind the scenes, and we don't twist God's word to suit ourselves. Rather, we keep everything we do and say out in the open, the whole truth on display, so that those who want to can see and judge for themselves in the presence of God. If our message is obscure to anyone, it's not because we're holding back in any way. No, it's because these other people are looking or going the wrong way and refuse to give it serious attention. All they have eyes for is the fashionable god of darkness. They think he can give them what they want, and they won't have to bother believing a truth that they can't see. They're stone blind to the dayspring brightness of the message that shines with Christ, who gives us the best picture of God we'll ever get. Remembering our message is not about ourselves. We're proclaiming Jesus Christ, the Master. All we are is messengers, errand runners for Jesus, for you. It started when God said, "Light up the darkness," and our lives filled up with light as we saw and understood God in the face of Christ, all bright and beautiful. If you only look at us, you might, miss the brightness. We carry this precious message around in unadorned clay pots of our ordinary lives. That's to prevent anyone from confusing God's incomparable power with us. As it is, there's not much chance of that. You know for yourselves that we're not much to look at. We've been surrounded and battered by trouble. But we're not demoralized, and we're not sure what to do. But we know that God knows what to do. We've been spiritually terrorized, but God hasn't left our side. We've been thrown down, but we haven't been broken. What they did to Jesus, they do to us. Trial and torture, mockery and murder. What Jesus did among them, he does in us. He lives. Our lives are constant risk for Jesus' sake, which makes Jesus' life all more evident in us. While we're going through the worst, you're getting in on the best. And here ends our readings for the day.